This is some wheat that we took off of the combine. After we got it off the combine, we brought it straight into the house and got it into some containers, so there's less chance of contamination and any foreign matter in there from being outside, from insects or animals or whatever. So we bring it in, and if we're going to use it for cooking or grinding or anything like that, we want to keep it someplace like this. Anyways, we're going to have a look and see just what we've got here and how to clean it up and use it for grinding and cooking. So I put about a cup of wheat into the cookie sheet here. And I just want to point out a couple of things. What you want to look for, this here is ergot. And I put a couple in here that I picked out just to point out what they look like. You don't want to get any ergot in anything you're going to eat or feed, because ergot is bad, and you can look that up online to see what the deal is with ergot. But if you happen to see anything like that, pieces of them, they look like they're the grains have been infected by a little bit of a fungus while they're out in the field. And rye is particularly susceptible to this, and wheat can pick it up a little bit too, obviously. But they're usually purple or black, and they're seed heads, and they're swollen. Quite often they're a little bit bigger, or they get broken up. And anything you see like that, you want to make sure you hand pick those out and don't eat them, because they're not good for you. So that's one thing we're going to have to pick out, making sure there isn't any in there. If you don't have any of that, that's awesome. A couple other things, there's a little bit of chaff, a little bit of barley, and not too, little pieces of unthrashed heads. We want to get all that out because it's kind of fibery and it might get kind of caught in your craw a little bit when you're eating. You don't want any of that stuff finding its way into your food. So I'm just looking here. Oh, there's a wild oat right here too. It's nice if you can get them out. The barley and the wild oat, they won't hurt you any if you run them through the mill. It's just a little bit of fiber, but like I say, it might be a little bit crawy in the back of your throat. So we'll try and pick out as much of that as we can. So to start with, I got 2 sieves here. This is a round hole perforated sieve that I just found on something and kind of bent it into a sieve. And then I happened to luck out and get an older one from a seed cleaning plant that's got some slotted holes in it. And it's can't remember what number it is, but it's a little bit smaller. So I'm going to pass all the wheat through the first bigger sieve to take out the big pieces. And then after that's done, I'll pass it through this other sieve, and we'll keep the stuff that's left behind. That way we get rid of all the small weed seeds and all of the bigger pieces, and we'll use the stuff that's in the middle, and we'll have to pick it by hand or use some water on it. All the finer stuff and smaller stuff left behind, most of it. So this is the stuff that's been through the big one and the little one. There's still a little bit of picking to do, but we've got most of the foreign material out of it now. After passing it through the fine sieve and the coarse sieve, this is what I'm left with. This is all the fine stuff that's small enough to go through the fine sieve. And this is the stuff that the coarse sieve picked out. And this is the wheat that passed through that was left behind by the fine sieve and passed through the coarse sieve. There's still a little bit of picking in there. I'm going to run it through the coarse sieve one more time just to see if I can save myself a little bit of picking to get that stuff out. And then we'll move on to the next step. It took me about 5 minutes to run it through the coarse sieve one more time, just to see what we would get, and that looked like quite a bit of barley came out, so looked like time well spent. This is what our cleaned wheat looks like. So I think I'm going to run it through again, because it looked like that was something to do. So there's our screened wheat. And this is what the screenings look like. Looks like about 20% by volume. We'll feed this to the chickens. And I'm going to take this outside and just pour it back and forth into a bucket in the wind to try and get most of the chaff out that's left in there. There's just a few little bits of barley that the guy can pick out and double check, make sure that we got everything out that we want to have out. We got in some water here, and you can see a lot of the chaff is floating to the top. So we're just kind of gonna pan for gold and try and get the chaffy stuff out after all the wheat settles. Anything that floats, we're gonna float it right off the top. And you can see the water is just not perfectly clean. There's always a little bit of dust that comes in on the wheat. So that'll go away with the water. We'll do several rinses and sort of pan off this floaty stuff. Washing of the wheat, although not strictly necessary, some people don't do that at all. I like to do it because the wheat kind of comes from the field a little bit dusty, and I kind of pick up on that gritty taste. And depending on how long it's been in the field and exposed to field conditions, how much dirt will wash off it. This stuff came off pretty clean, and if you're having trouble getting the chaff off, the water really floats the chaff off well. If you do use the water method, you'll want to make sure the wheat is completely dry before you try to seal it in a jar again. It'll take about 4 or 5 days to dry just on the counter back to bone dry, which it needs to be to keep. Or if you want to, you can put the wheat on a tray and turn your oven on low, get it just warming up, and put the tray in there and shut the oven off, and do that a couple of times over the evening. Just warm the oven up a little bit and then stir the wheat and just keep doing that. And then by morning, just leave the oven shut off, and it should be pretty well dry in the morning, and that'll speed this process up. So there I got the wheat in a broiler pan. Just picked through it, found a few more pieces of barley, and I got the oven running. You don't want to cook the wheat, you just want to get it warm enough to get the water evaporating out of it. So get the oven started here, and it's getting warm. We'll just shut it off, and I'll throw the wheat inside and stir it a couple times, and heat it up again a few times before bedtime, and then just leave it in overnight with the oven off, and we'll see how dry it is in the morning. So this is the next day. The wheat is nice and dry. You can tell if you pop a little in your mouth and kind of crunch down on it with your molars. It shouldn't be squishy at all. It should give you a right satisfying crunchy pop. It should just sort of, be really crunchy and not chewy at all, to make sure it's good and dry. There's 6 cups of wheat here, and we're gonna run it through our KitchenAid mill. This old girl has done a lot of work, so hopefully it'll do 6 cups of wheat. Grinding wheat is a lot of work. You see those hand cranks, and you can do it, but it's a workout, so that's what we're up to. I'm going to sift the bran out of the flour. It'll be coarse enough with all that bran in there, and we like to make bran muffins, so this is a good way to separate it. There we have bran, and we got brown flour. Took about an hour to grind this flour. I had to let the grinder cool down a couple times because it was getting too hot. But we ended up with 6 cups of wheat, yielded just over 6 cups of pretty nice brown flour, and I sifted out, this is 2 cups of bran for bran muffins and stuff. So that's what we're left with here. So we're gonna make it into bread. We've got our Black & Decker bread maker here. We're just gonna use the dough setting. It takes about an hour and 30 minutes on the dough setting. And so we've got 2 cups of water with 3 tablespoons of homemade butter cut up into pieces as per the recipe. We've got a teaspoon of salt. We've got 3 tablespoons of dry milk powder, 4 tablespoons of sugar. And then for the flour, we're going to go 1/3 our homegrown flour and about 2/3 store-bought white flour. To use your own homegrown flour, the more you use, kind of the more primitive the bread. We're not looking for a Viking loaf. We want something we can make into sandwiches. So we're gonna put about 1/3 homemade ground flour in there. That's 1.5 cups of homemade flour and 4 cups of white flour. And then we're going to use this Fleshman's yeast. There's 1 1/4 teaspoons of that. So we're going to throw it all into the bread machine and mix it up. So it's been an hour and a half. We're going to split it in half and put half of it in each of these trays. And then the house is a little cold, so I got the oven warmed up just a bit so they can proof in the oven and raise for a while.